Well, hi everybody. It is Sunday. It's time for the weekend video. Get ready. Hey, well, today I'm going to talk about something that's pretty common actually in the religious world, um, and definitely something most gospel revolutionaries can relate to, um, who before they came to understand the gospel dealt with anger towards God. And I was talking to somebody this past week who her experience in Christianity, which she took so seriously prior to understanding the gospel, she had a lot of anger towards God because she was convinced that in the end God was going to punish her for something. She was convinced. Her doctrines were very heavy-handed and very convincing. Had her convinced that she was going to be punished, and she was angry. She felt she had anger towards God. And she talks about how now that she's been listening to Mike and Barris on the Powercasts, and now even videos as well, she says that it brings some sanity to all of that. I like her word sanity, and there's a lot of sanity in the gospel. But yeah, a lot of people have anger issues towards God because they believe that God is either chastising them now in this life for something, or will in this life for something, or definitely will when this life is over. God's going to punish them for something, and they're convinced of it. And because of that, they've got ill feelings towards God, and it's understandable. And in Hebrews chapter 12, that is discussed actually, and it's called the root of bitterness. In chapter 12, it talks about how Jesus uh, he endured uh, a lot of bloodshed and sweat and tears and scourging and chastisement. But Hebrews goes on to explain that that was endured for all of humanity, so that the covenant that he then being the minister of the covenant of peace, and this new covenant, which is the covenant of peace and grace, it's a better testament, and that grace is now established in a covenant of peace, and there is no more scourging. There is no more punishment. It was fulfilled in Christ at the cross. And then in verse 15, it says, so be diligent. And being diligent means sometimes you got to make an effort to remind yourself that this is truly the case in this covenant. And Paul says, be diligent, because if you're not diligent in reminding yourself, making the effort to remind yourself uh, of these things, you could fail of the grace of God. And a root of bitterness can develop, meaning you will forget about the grace of God and the reality of that truth, and succumb to this false perception of punishment and scourging now or in the future, and you can become bitter. It's a natural reaction. If you're believing something, your emotions are going to react to what's going on in your mind. And so it's a perfectly natural reaction. Um, and that's why the gospel is so important to remind yourself of. And, um, and as Mike says, CPR, consistency, persistency, and repetition. I said that somewhat wrong. I've got the words right, but I didn't say it the way he says it. Anyway, um, this failing of the grace of God is discussed at length in Mike's book, and it's also discussed at length in an audio series that Mike taught called "Don't Offend the Grace of God." I highly recommend it if you want to know more. It's revolutionary, I know. Have a revolutionary week.